introduce you. So we're going to start off now. Welcome to CAWASA webinar 27 of 2021 series. And this evening, we again grateful for the Operators Without Borders for finding us Mr. Tim Fettback, who is going to be our guest presenter today. And I will hand over to Tim so he can introduce himself. Thank you, Tim.
Thank you, Ignatius. Thanks for having me here. And really exciting for me also to be here in, for me, a totally new region. I've never been to the Caribbean. I know Latin America, South America. I've never been more in the Central and Northern America. But I'm Tim Fettback. So at the moment in Germany, but much focused on sanitation, wastewater treatment for fast growing cities, more in developing countries, mainly in Tanzania. But I've been working with BORDA, which is an NGO focused on decentralized wastewater treatment solutions, not only the technology, but the whole enabling environment around it. I've been working in Dar es Salaam, but also for BORDA Africa, so with projects in South Africa, Zambia, Mali, Lesotho. I've been working in India also with a CDD, they are called, also related to BORDA in the sanitation sector. And yeah, then I moved to back to the academia. I went to the Hafen City University in Hamburg, where basically I'm doing my PhD in relation to Faecal Sludge management. So the sludge which is accumulating in the pits. There's one microphone on. And they are actually, I'm thinking about the institutional and financial arrangements. So how to get the systems the whole system more efficient, because in the end you can have a very nice technology. If it does not work efficiently and it's too expensive, it will never scale. So the question is, how can a more efficient system, what would it cost in the end, and can this be carried by the beneficiaries, so in the end over kind of sanitation levy or taxes. And yeah, at the same time, I'm also there lecturing in a course which is called Technologies for Sustainable Water Resource Management. And I would like to also present one of these lectures to you. And they are more looking into Fecal sludge management, and let's see how far we get, also decentralized wastewater treatment. And yeah, so I'm looking forward, and I think also whenever you have questions, please we're not such a big group. I'm very much open also for interactions, just either write into the chat or just open your mic and ask, and then I know more or less in which direction to go. So I will just share my slides. The first question would be if you see this, and then I will try to make this as a presentation. Do you still see the full screen now?
Yes.
Yes, perfect. Perfect. So yeah, as I said, Tim Fettback, and you will also see here Professor Wolfgang Dickhaut. So he's actually the lead of our research group, which is environmentally sound urban and infrastructure planning. Very large name, but much focused on sustainable urban water management. And on the right side, you already see the main core of our, or the heart of the technology, which we try to scale up, and which is like a Dewatts system, decentralized wastewater treatment system. I'll show much more about this later, just to get an impression how this technologies look like. So basically, today I would like to talk about decentralized solutions, resource efficient solutions, And before really diving into the solutions, I would like to talk a little bit more about general principles which we try to follow in the sanitation planning more even. And then, of course, this reflects then also to the technologies themselves and also the operation and maintenance of the systems. So generally, you already see here the two different terms, wastewater and fecal sludge management. I can imagine most of you are aware of the difference, nevertheless, from the beginning. So fecal sludge is all what is accumulating in the pits and the containment systems on site, and wastewater is anything which is flushed into a sewer system and then treated off-site. So there we have two general different technologies, approaches, systems, value chains, different management systems, different institutional arrangements. So this really has to be seen as two different systems. I just had a fast look and I saw that also in the Caribbean, about 50% of the systems are on site and about 50% are sewer systems. Correct me if I'm wrong, but then also fecal sludge management is still a significant portion. And I also saw that about 80% of the wastewater is not treated, but discharged to the ocean then mainly, to the Caribbean Sea. So I can imagine that also wastewater treatment is one major aspect. So I would like, I would like to start again with a picture. I hope, or I don't know, basically I hope that some of you have been there last week, but I would repeat a bit. So basically this is one area in Dar es Salaam in Tanzania where we implemented one project for fecal sludge management. And I would just like to show this picture as it shows some of the key aspects of sanitation. So we see in the middle the gray water drain, which is also in the dry season, there's always water in. So that's how we see this is gray water. We also see a toilet structure where we know that below it there's a type of pit, maybe lined, but at least there will be some liquid from the pit, from the excreta, infiltrating into the soil. And we also see at the site that basically the houses are already elevated and adapted to a certain type of flooding which happens in this area every year. So always in the big rain seasons, mainly in March, April, May, a little bit in November also, this area is flushed, and the water rises up to here. And you could almost say this is part of the system, because then the toilets are constructed in a way that basically the sludge is flushed out of the system. And that's one of the main emptying methods, which of course leads to a high load of organic pollution, which affects the environmental health. So we'll have a lot of nitrogen, phosphate in our water bodies, leading to eutrophication. And we also have organics in our water bodies, which leads to the reduction of oxygen until really we have anaerobic conditions. And that's then the eutrophication happens and the whole ecosystem collapses. But of course, we also have the exposure of the human beings to pathogens from the excreta mainly. And you can imagine that this is a normal road, so people walk here, children play here. So there's a significant risk. At the same time, we also see here some urban informal agriculture, some sugarcane growing, where you can see a benefit then that basically the nutrient-rich water, of course, is a potential resource which can be used for irrigation, and then also does not have to be treated to such a high level, because the nutrients in the water are basically a benefit for the irrigation and are not necessarily to be removed, which is technically also a big challenge to get the nitrogen and the phosphate out of the wastewater. So also here some pictures from so it's close to the site where we implemented a major road, and then the solid waste accumulating in front of the bridge after a strong rain event. So also they are being flushed out of the neighborhoods, out of the streets, accumulating in front of the bridge. Dar es Salaam is also at the ocean. So from here, the river goes into the ocean. So this is only a part of the plastic. You can imagine how much plastic is flushed into the oceans and the effects of that. But just the effects here on the infrastructure is that basically the water after some time does not go under the bridge anymore, but goes over the bridge. And we have then an impact here that people cannot pass anymore, and that we have damages of infrastructure. And at the same time, this will increase. So we know that due to climate change, water levels are rising at the sea, but also, of course, the rainfalls are getting stronger and the drought periods are getting longer. Temperatures are increasing. All this has an impact on our urban water cycle. And down here again, the picture of a kind of solution which we are trying to implement. On the other hand, so you have the wastewater treatment with the sewer systems, but also the fecal sludge management. And this is not only about the treatment. So we have the whole value chain. We start at the containment system, and then it has to be emptied. So the design of the containment system, of course, influences the emptyability of the containment system. So if there's no access, first of all, to this containment system, we cannot go with a conventional truck. So we have to have some other solutions. For example, here this is a trash pump, which can also pump some kind of particles. So maybe 2 millimeter of particles size. And there are lots of other systems. But then the other one is also you have to be able to enter into the containment system. So often operators get to the pits and then have no access because it was completely closed. So they first have to break the walls of the containment system to re-access it. And then after emptying, we go for the transportation. There are several different types of transportation. We have good experience also with the smaller tricycles, which can easily enter into the densely informal neighborhoods with the small roads, but also has lower investment costs, lower capital costs compared to the sludge truck. And they are easily available. So in Tanzania, sludge trucks usually have to be imported secondhand, which of course is quite a process, especially for small entrepreneurs. Globally, we can see that on-site sanitation is the dominant system. So at the moment, we are about 2.7 billion people depending on fecal sludge management of on-site systems. We still have a significant amount also of open defecation and other environmental systems, especially in Africa. But the number you can see in the middle is the people dependent at the moment on on-site sanitation systems, which is septic tanks, flush or pour flush pits or dry pits. So they are all characterized in a way that they need frequent emptying of the sludge, which then has to be transported, treated, reused. And we see that the projections are going to 5 billion people by 2030. So we have a huge demand in the next years. Caribbean, I cannot say exactly, but as I saw it, about 50% on-site sanitation systems. And I think the population growth is not as strong. but nevertheless, it might be possible to learn from other regions. Especially, we have much experience in the Southeast Asian regions who really already started to scale up solutions for fecal sludge management. Again, like the value chains, many of you might know it, and the value chain for fecal sludge management and the value chain for wastewater treatment. So we go from containment, basically user interface, and then we have the containment, we have the emptying, transportation, treatment, and then reuse or disposal. If we talk about resource efficiency, of course, we go more into the direction of reuse, thinking of all the resources in the water. First of all, the water itself, but also the nutrients and the energy which we can gain by producing biogas, for example. And then in the end, we also can produce something like compost, have a soil conditioner. And this is basically something which has also different potentials if you look at small or large scale. And then if we go into the value chain of a wastewater system, we have one significant difference, that we don't have the emptying and transportation, but we have a conveyance. We conventionally don't have a containment system, but this is optional. Optional. So if we have a containment system in a wastewater system, then of course the sludge also accumulates here, and we would need emptying transportation again. And we would have a special type of wastewater system, which is then a solid-free system with a simplified sewer system, but with a big advantage compared to fecal sludge management, that we have a complete treatment of our wastewater. If we talk about fecal sludge management, we only treat the sludge in the end. There will always be something which is missing here, the infiltration into the soil. So our partially treated liquid fraction of our wastewater will be infiltrated on site. So this is like a first step, and it is a much more feasible step. And that's why now, over the past 10 years or longer, it is going more and more into the direction of really acknowledging that in most of the parts, the wastewater system will not be implemented in the near future, but safe and environmental friendly fecal sludge management is achievable and should be the first stage. We then, if you talk about safe, of course, try to reduce the risk for the environment and the risk of any contact with pathogens and human beings. This is a photo from Dar es Salaam, more from the city center. And I like to show this because it shows the variety of the urban usage and the land use and the different institutions and all the aspects which we need to consider if we now look into a town or a city and see this huge work coming to us. So Dar es Salaam is a town of 6.6 or 7 million people with a growth of 6 million people per 6%. So we have every year a small town basically increasing in this town. So if you are now the mayor of such a town, you have just a huge work to do, and about 10% of the town, it will be less probably have a sewer system, and the rest are not connected to sewer systems but have different types of containment systems. And the sewer systems are usually in the older and in the high income areas. And in the background, you can see the old center and the commercial center with a high-rise building, very modern center of the town. But this is the very small part of it. And from here, there are some sewer systems which bring the wastewater untreated into the ocean. And then we see the informal settlements in the foreground, and we see that basically, this is residential area mainly, but there will also be some small medium enterprise in it. We see that the accessibility is very difficult, so there might be one road going here somewhere, we cannot even see it anymore, but how do we get now from a truck to there? So basically a truck can pump about 50 meter, maximum 100 meter, the sludge. How will a house which is more than 100 meter away from a road be served? And we also see that there will be quite a variety of income. We see here in the front, quite a reasonable large building with a beautiful plot. So this people might be of a higher income compared to just the neighbor behind them. And at the same time, we also see that they are directly at the road with a nice access. So here a sludge truck would have an easy job to enter and to empty the pits, even though this one might also not be connected to a sewer system. But here having the access is easy, the costs for serving are low, and at the same time, the ability and the willingness to pay also quite reasonable high as an expectation. We also see something like a church here. So how is our wastewater generated at the church? How do we provide the toilets here? We see a cemetery, which might also have an impact on our water quality and. So you can just imagine how many different entities we have here and also stakeholders and interests which need to be aligned. We try to put this a little bit into a graphic and showing the approaches we have, or the ideas we have, the concepts. All in purple is decentralized wastewater treatment. So we can imagine that wastewater treatment, decentralized wastewater treatment is reasonable if you have, for example, a new housing development, and this is all under one management, and they can be connected, and there is a willingness to pay for it from the beginning. And then there's also space available for a decentralized treatment plant. And then we always have to consider also here the full chain, or basically we even start planning from the end. Will we discharge to a river or to the ocean? How is our receiving water body? Depending on that, we need to have a different quality of treatment. Or as here, you could also have a kind of reuse in either landscape irrigation with an additional benefit of the landscaping, or also irrigation, but then of course with multiple barriers, for example, irrigation of bananas or papaya, or other fruit trees which are not in direct contact with the treated wastewater, so that we don't need a disinfection before that. So we're always trying to keep the treatment system as simple as possible. And one method of doing it is by adjusting the end use. So if we don't need to reduce the nutrients because they are basically a fertilizer for our plants, then we don't need a technology which reduces the nutrients, which then of course is a big financial benefit for our system. We can also imagine an institution like a hospital, where again a lot of wastewater is generated in one entity. This is all an on-site treatment then, so not only on-site containment but on-site treatment. We have one management operating the whole system, and here it might be not possible to reuse the water on site because that requires quite some space. So there's no other option, but it has to be discharged to a stream. Then we might need some additional treatment. You can also think of market areas or bus stands where people have a willingness to pay for the service for a public toilet, for example. And then again, we have a certain business case. Schools could also be a potential area, but here we do not actually see real business cases, as there's no direct income at this place. So this is then dependent on the political will to implement treatment systems at schools. And then in yellow, we see fecal sludge management. And also here, like I already talked about it a lot, but it's more the decentralized approach. So having the treatment system close to the source where the sludge is generated reduces the costs, as a major or the major cost for fecal sludge management in the operation is the transportation. So if we don't have to transport the sludge over long distances, for sure we reduce the costs, and our operators can do much more services, much more trips per day. So the investment costs get recovered faster, and just our operational costs are lower. Of course, this is always related to challenges of finding area in our town. If we're in a densely populated urban area, finding space and acceptance for a fecal sludge treatment plant is really complex. But the acceptance issue, of course, is also one which can be tackled, and the systems are designed in a way that they have basically no nuisance. They are underground. You don't smell them. You don't hear them. You don't have flies. So this is, of course, a very important aspect if you want to implement such a system in a densely urban populated area. And at the same time, here also very small in orange, the solid waste management, just as a reminder that whichever sanitation system is implemented, it always has to go hand in hand with solid waste management, as if there's no well-established solid waste management, then the risk of having solid waste in the pits or also in our wastewater system, but it's mainly an issue of the pits, is high, and having solid waste in the pits really makes the whole emptying and transportation and treatment much more complex. And also looking at this now, coming back to the fecal sludge, we can imagine how big the variation is of fecal sludge which gets to our treatment site. So depending on where it is collected, if we would now say here at this bus stand, there's no decentralized treatment plant, but only a pit or a septic tank. So the sludge collected here just stays very short time in the containment system. So basically there has not been much decomposition of the organic matter before it is emptied and then transported to our treatment plant. And we might have other systems which might not be lined, and there's a lot of, and we have a good percolation into the ground. Then these containment systems might fill up only after 10 years. And the characteristics of that sludge is then quite different, as it is then the organics are already quite far decomposed, and our COD, so the difficult or the slow degrading, not biologically composing organics are still in our sludge. And this has, of course, an impact on our treatment system. And as I mentioned before, for example, if there's solid waste going into our sludge, or also a wrong management of the toilets. If any, we observe it, for example, salt or even battery fluid being put into the pits because it is believed, or also partly true, that it reduces the smell, and so we have even heavy metals or salt in our fecal sludge, which has a big impact on the biological treatment systems which we implement. Here, a different scenario. So this is a town in the very far west of Tanzania. So basically at the Lake Victoria, a large lake in the middle of Tanzania, Kenya, Uganda, and Rwanda. No, Rwanda not. Tanzania, Kenya, Uganda. And this is a major a resource, much of, or a lot of fish being harvested here. It is a major source of water supply for drinking water for the cities around it, also for irrigation, and the water is also conveyed hundreds of kilometers to other towns in the surrounding, and so a very important source. And at the same time, there are cities exploding at its shores. So one of them is Mwanza, which is now over 1 million inhabitants. And the characteristics here are a little bit different because it's very hilly. So we see that also, of course, the topography and other land characteristics have an influence on our systems, our soil characteristics, and so on. But here, if we say this is a hilly area where basically the accessibility to this rocky mountains up here is absolutely not given, we will have some kinds of full on-site systems. Very difficult to see here. We tried, it was tried to show in green, but basically these are some kind of, for example, urine diverting toilets with a composting system on site. So basically the containment, no emptying, no transportation, but treatment, all is on site, and also the reuse is on site. So this is nevertheless a safe system. Or other options could also be something like a simplified sewer system, which connects several households, and simplified in a way that it's not too deep. So it's a shallow system, operates without any electrical energy, so no pumping required. And we can also think of having a settler at a reasonable place which has to be accessible for sure, but from here then only the liquid continues and gets treated at a lower level, and the sludge can accumulate here, and the sewer system following the settler can of course be then again more simplified. Again, similar principle, looking at different types of discharge. So having something like a constructed wetland, maybe also an irrigation, and it can have an overflow to a water body, although we always try to avoid any discharge to water bodies, because once we discharge to water bodies, the requirements for the effluent quality is of course much higher. And if we can reuse it on site, we always try to do that. And in the bottom corner again, the fecal sludge management for areas where no sewer systems can be implemented. Of course, one major criteria for sewer systems to be implemented is also the water supply. So if there's no water supply, then better to go for dry toilets and to save the water. And actually here in Mwanza, they had a quite good concept also for recovering the costs. So the hilly areas were not yet connected to water supply. So they went directly hand in hand and said if any household wants to be connected to water supply, they also have to be connected to the simplified sewer system. And they directly from the beginning also collected a sanitation levy. So on top of the water bill, a certain percentage was added for the wastewater management. Yeah, coming back to one of the pictures in the beginning, I think we can see here also this interlinkage of the different sanitation topics. So something which I also tried to show in one of the first slides, where basically you can see that the excreta, so the black water management, goes in hand with solid waste management and goes in hand also with stormwater management, and in the end also is interlinked with the water supply. So one thing we just mentioned, if there's no water supply or the water supply creates the need for wastewater treatment. The more water goes into an urban area, the more water has to be treated. But also on the other hand, the less wastewater is treated, the more our freshwater resources are polluted. Stormwater is a topic which will get more and more attention in future, as flooding will really impact most of our urban areas. So stormwater will have a significant impact on our wastewater infrastructure, but for sure we should also manage it separately from our wastewater. So we always try to have pure wastewater and pure stormwater treatment, and always avoid connecting any stormwater drains with the wastewater treatment, because then basically we would treat clean rainwater. So also here in the stormwater management aspects, we look much into decentralized solutions and not only the drainage of the water to any receiving water body, because that would then lead to flooding downstream. And yeah, a big other topic, maybe we'll have one lecture or one exchange on stormwater management, but here we much look into this concept of water sensitive urban design. Basically also again looking into what are synergy effects, what are potentials on site, and also looking at the co-benefits, for example, cooling because of urban vegetation. Yeah, and also already the linkage to solid waste I already mentioned. During floods, solid waste gets transported into the environment, gets transported into our sewer systems, leads to clogging, leads to pollution of our receiving water bodies, and other way around, solid waste itself can also lead to flooding. Here at the university at HCU, we are looking at, we are actually a quite small team, but we are trying to cover different topics. But one of the main topics is the stormwater management and the water sensitive urban design. Here just as a symbol, this 3 infiltration pits looks simple, but once you go to the implementation, it gets quite complex, especially going to the scaling, so that these systems are really implemented at scale. So there's also a big topic in European cities at the moment. In German cities, 50% of the trees in the towns are actually suffering under stress. So they have drought issues in summer, and at the same time in the same summer we have flooding issues. So the droughts are increasing, but also the extreme rainfall events are increasing, and they are in the same summertime. But our systems are designed in a way just to discharge the water out of the urban area instead of keeping it in the soil and making it available for trees, for vegetation, which can then evapotranspirate it and lead to cooling of the area, for example, but also providing space for recreation and other aspects. We look at decentralized black water management, we look at Faecal Sludge management, which is mainly me, and we look at gray water management. So really also at the separation of the streams. For all of them, we basically mainly focus on decentralized and nature-based solutions. Within the implementation of systems, you might also have come across this already several times. There is the opportunity, the option of either doing one big jump, trying to implement a huge system from 0 to, let's say, 80% coverage or something, or there's the possibility of going step by step. This can be in relation to treatment systems, sanitation management systems. That can also be in relation to standards, for example, effluent standards, saying we need a very high quality, a very high standard from the beginning, or saying we need like a small, let's do first the first step. And basically we have experienced, and also many other in the sector, that this big, large steps usually fail because the enabling environment is not yet given. So basically, if we go smaller steps, we will be faster in the end, and we will get to the same desired solution. But of course, not necessarily in the same speed as we would if such a big step is feasible. However, as mentioned, most of the times, this big step is just not possible because stakeholders don't have the time to readapt to the system. It is difficult to plan. It needs a lot of finance. We have to, so enabling environment with skills and capacities. We need the financial arrangements. We need the right legislation. We need the acceptance of the population, and all that is very difficult to have in place for a big step in the beginning. And on the other hand, we see that the first steps are usually more effective than the last ones. Reducing organics in our organic pollution in our wastewater is easier than reducing nitrogen. Reducing phosphates is even more complex, and reducing micropollutants is even more complex, and disinfection also. So the first stage is usually the easier one, but already has a big impact. So we get more effect for a certain cost. And just this other idea of decentralization, then also having like several small systems does not really require much more time if we say they are implemented in parallel. So the first stages might be slow, but then it can scale quite fast if they are implemented simultaneously in parallel in several areas. But we maintain a robustness, because if one system fails, not the whole system failed. So if one system fails, we learn out of it, and while implementing the next one, we can improve. And this gives us a certain type of robustness. I already mentioned the enabling environment, very central part of any scaling process and technology selection, concept development. So either we find a solution which fits into the existing enabling environment, or we identify the weak points in our enabling environment and try to develop it. So if we say, for example, legal frameworks have certain gaps, which are barriers for the implementation of any improved system, then we might first want to fill this gap and get a better legislation in a specific aspect before implementing a system. Or we say it is very difficult to change the legislation, then we find a solution which does not need a change in legislation. Same with skills and capacities, roles and responsibilities, institutional arrangements, social cultural acceptance, and government support, the willingness of the government. So summarizing some of these approaches is that we need adaptive, expandable, decentralized and cost-effective approaches, which are not only on-site, but also include sewer systems. So there are areas where sewer systems are appropriate, there are areas where on-site solutions are appropriate. And all this has to be resilient to economic, demographic, and environmental shocks, as we are implementing it in a very dynamic situation with this fast growing urban areas which go through a lot of development. So any development and any implementation, of course, always has to be done with local participation. They have the knowledge on the ground, and we have to fulfill their needs. So basically, without local participation, this will never be successful. There's no simple and single solution for any of the urban sanitation challenges. We always have to look holistically at the enabling environment and try to find a solution which is contextual, which is fitting into the specific context where we are. And then we have this question of either we have a basic access to sanitation for all, or at least for a large part of the population, or we have a very advanced treatment, advanced sanitation solutions for a few. And actually at the moment, we are more on the side of advanced treatment for a few and very low services for the majority of the population. But we should get more to a basic access for all or for a majority of the population. I already mentioned the government support. I don't want to talk much more about that, but for any change process to be efficient, to be effective, to really get to the aim that we can get to a scaling, government support and the political will are of course 100% required. And you can see this in some just two examples. One, the Swachh Bharat mission in India, where millions of household latrines have been constructed by the government, and not only providing financial support, but also doing this national behavior change campaigns. And something similar is also happening in Tanzania, which is less financial support, but more really this awareness creation and behavior change campaigns. If I'm just repeating, if you have the feeling you would like to ask anything, please feel free to write it in the chat. I would now go a little bit more to the technologies of fecal sludge treatment. And I can imagine that we don't have too much time to then also go to the treatment technologies of decentralized wastewater treatment, but I think they are very similar, as I would mainly talk about the Dewatts system. Again, the value chain. So we'll go slowly through it, as you always have to design the entire system, and each of this different steps have to be aligned. So depending on your user interface, you will design your containment system, and you will design your emptying, transportation, treatment, and so on. A way of categorizing it, of visualizing it, and also to a tool to assist the decision making for certain technologies is this quite simple tool from EAVAC, so a Swiss research institute which is focused on water management, and within that one there's they developed a compendium for sanitation systems. Many might have come across it. And in that one, there's this tool, which is the sanitation system template, basically looking always what goes into your system at each stage. So at before the user interface, and the output of the user interface is the input to your containment or conveyance, and the output of your conveyance is the input to your treatment, and so on. And basically there you can always decide according to your input on certain technologies, for example, for the user interface, or for the collection storage, or for the conveyance, or the treatment. And within this guide, this tool, you will then have certain possibilities to decide, okay, if urine enters into my system, how do I treat it? What are the technologies available for treatment? If feces enter, what if gray water enters? What if I separate gray water? And this is like the basic idea again of source separation. If we mix all these different sources, or if we mix all these different streams, then of course the treatment will be more complex. If we can keep it apart from the beginning, so we have a stream of gray water, we have a stream of storm water, and maybe in a very ideal case, we even have urine diverting toilets, then our treatment and our reuse will be much more simple. Typical toilets, either you can have a user interface with a pour flush or a full flush system, or a dry toilet. And in the case of Dar es Salaam, some estimations, most of the people have really dry toilets, dry pits. Another have pour flush, and a few only have a full flush system. So here already we see, if you have a full flush system, then maybe a sewer system is appropriate. Not always, but in some cases. But like for a dry pit, for sure, a sewer system will not work. And for a pour flush toilet, very certainly also not. And apart from that, it's also very important to have a management directly at the site, that no substances which basically are polluting our wastewater, are then making our treatment complicated, should enter. And this is especially a challenge if we are in areas with a high fluctuation of the users, because then any education is difficult, like in a hospital or public toilets or similar. Next step is a containment system. This is now a septic tank where you have some sedimentation, pre-treatment, anaerobic processes. Of course, also emission of of greenhouse gases, anaerobic digestion of organics leading to methane. And we have the outlet, which is then the infiltration to the soil, which still can lead to environmental impacts, as this will be nutrient-rich water going into our surrounding, and also not disinfected water. However, most of the contaminants are staying in here, and this then accumulates and has to be emptied after a time. As mentioned, at some point, we have the aim of preventing contamination of our water bodies, of our soil, of our environment. But mostly the very first aim is to break the contact between humans and excreta. Just reading the comments so that I also can react on it. So basically, what about the business models? so how can they be developed for fecal sludge management in the Caribbean? Yeah, so in the Caribbean, I would need to talk with you. What are the options you have? But according to my experience, it is always very difficult to really come up with a business model that might more be a cost recovery model, because the business depends on the willingness of and the ability of the beneficiaries to pay for the service. And according to what I saw now, in many cases, or most cases, the costs are higher. The costs for providing the service and for installing any treatment systems and collection systems is higher compared to what people are willing and able to pay. Of course, there's always the possibility of using byproducts, generating biogas, biofuels, but this usually does not pay off. We see some potential and synergies. For example, if the fecal sludge is used to compost or basically to ferment also organic solid waste. So then you have, first of all, from the collection revenue, but at the same time, you also have the organic waste, which is organic solid waste, which is much more rich in energy and basically produces much more methane. And if this is done in a reasonable large scale, then there are also significant amount of energy can be produced. And then in that case, basically the fecal sludge is only the mean of using the water in the sludge to then dilute the organic waste that it can be well fermented in the biogas digester. Yeah, this is like one aspect. And there are also other small business models which might work out. I think in the in most of the cases, it is about recovering the costs and having continuous and reliable revenues. So I think having something like a sanitation levy is really big requirement, so that water utilities can really plan with how much they get, because of each cubic meter of water which is sold, they have a certain income, and with this one they can then provide service. Business models exist for emptying and transportation. I can imagine also in the Caribbean, sludge trucks are operating, vacuum trucks are operating, but usually they then discharge in places which are either very subsidized, so discharge in treatment plants where they only have to pay a certain very small amount, which does not cover for the costs of the treatment, or discharge illegally. So having a full value chain with cost recovery is quite a challenge. However, possible if there's some other way of collecting the fees. So one is, for example, over the water bills. Another one can also be over property taxes, and then costs and income. So reducing the costs, as I mentioned, for example, reducing the distances between the treatment plant and the containment systems, having scheduled emptying. So scheduled emptying means that it's not on demand, not only if the pit is full, someone calls, and all the rest of the time the trucks are standing and waiting for customers, but it can really be planned in this time of the year. We will serve this area of the city. This requires a lot of management, and is also not easy to implement, but there are good case scenarios, best practice examples from India, from from Malaysia. This really reduced the costs significantly. These are just some ideas. Thanks for your question, by the way. Thank you. So technologies, urine diverting, as I mentioned, some benefit of this is that the urine is the one which is full of the nutrients, and the feces is the one which is full of the pathogens, talking in general terms. And so if these are separated, we can treat them accordingly. And at the same time, if this is a dry toilet, we don't mix it with all the flushing water. And this is then, we have much less volume which has to be handled. This is how it can look like. These are, of course, systems which are more visible in rural areas or not very dense urban areas. And we have still the sludge on site. This can stay in there for a year, then an aerobic digestion. So basically what comes out is then compost. Nevertheless, it has to be handled with a certain level of security. So there can still be helminth eggs inside, for example. And the urine after simple treatment can be really used as a fertilizer. I see maybe there's another comment. Okay, there we really get to the question of how safe is it to use in agriculture. Are there any success stories in any country of using for growing food crops? Yes, they are. And it depends on the treatment. So it depends on the treatment, one point, but of course also depends on which type of agriculture. So if we talk about fecal sludge, then only the sludge has to be stabilized usually. You would not want to have fresh sludge on your fields, just alone for the smell. So stabilization means reducing the organics. And that can be done with simple processes. For example, biogas digesters. And then the sludge which comes out of there can be further treated or brought to the fields. But as I also mentioned here with the dry toilets, it will not be totally free of pathogens. So first of all, in the handling of it, the farmers or whoever is the operator needs to know that the sludge is not yet 100% safe. But if there's no further contact to other people, then this is possible. And then it comes, what type of crops do we it's not really fertilized with it, but because it's more a soil conditioner, so it increases the capacity of the soil, for example, to hold water. So depends on that. We have to, for example, use it in banana plantations. That's what we do very frequently, as bananas are fruits hanging on the tree. We know there's no contact to the people themselves before eating it. Even better if the fruit is cooked afterwards. So I see some other comments flying in. The limited number of fecal sludge treatment plants, I think, do not function properly due to high O&M costs and high energy costs. Okay, there we are at the energy. Private sector participation needs as an alternative. Okay, so private sector as an alternative, but if we already say that they are not functioning because of high costs, the private sector will most probably not be happy to come in as they need profit. But if we say high costs for energy, then I'm wondering which type of systems they are implementing, because there are quite some treatment technologies which operate almost without any electrical energy. We can have a look at those ones, then I can skip to them in the next slides. And yeah, of course, there are O&M costs, but for fecal sludge management is really mostly the emptying and transportation. The capital costs are also, of course, significant, and they are, yeah, both in emptying, transportation, and treatment. So urine separation, yes, is new. It's not, there's the whole EcoSun projects, also much supported by the GIZ. They have the issue of acceptability usually. I would say that's the main barrier why they are not scaling. But if we think of sustainability, actually urine diverting dry toilets are the most sustainable. We don't mix our different sources. We don't have water which we pollute on site. We have small volumes which we need to treat, or even if we can also think of, it doesn't even have to be treated on site. So if we would then collect the sludge, which is then pure feces in our urine diverting toilets, and have a kind of container-based system for that, it is much easier to handle than to handle this fecal sludge, which is, again, has a lot of water inside. So there are high potentials for it, but it really requires a whole system change, I would call it. So I think aeration, yes, if these are the aerobic treatment systems, they of course need electrical energy. That's why we more go for anaerobic treatment, which does not require electrical energy, but it requires more space then. So it depends if there's space available or not in some circumstances, but that's usually more related to decentralized wastewater treatment. Mechanized systems are the more efficient one. So of course it always has to be done with a good calculation over a reasonable time horizon. What are the operational costs? What is the upfront investment? So there are also systems in Indonesia where mechanized treatment plants are the ones which actually operated at lower costs, but these are like some exceptions. But they operated at lower costs because they could be implemented very close to the producers of the sludge. So they had less costs for transporting, more costs for treatment, but there the business model was better. But it's with the mechanized systems, of course, you also need more capacities for operation. So you need an operator who is very well trained. If the mechanized parts have any issue, then it might require some time to repair them and so on. So this increases the complexity. Yeah, I think I will actually really skip a bit as we are also already very far in time, already getting late everywhere. So this is the containment system, one full on-site system. There are other full on-site systems like also worm-based systems, and this is also not a game. If you look into tiger worms in India, so there are full treatment plants functioning with this on-site system or vermicomposting, so worm systems. Going the first step on the left, you see how systems are being emptied and are being emptied manually, and this is also no big exception, and then having different types of emptying systems. We talked about this, different types of technologies. Just again, pointing out the difference of the characteristics of wastewater and fecal sludge, and also knowing that wastewater is more homogeneous. Fecal sludge can be have huge diversity. It can be have a huge diversity in the characteristics. That is about the quality aspect, and then about the quantity. Also, Fecal Sludge is highly dynamic, and we have generally a collection-based method. So we look how much is being collected, how many trucks do we have, how many trips do they do per day, which volume do they transport, or we look into the production and we estimate how much does a person produce per day. There's also a way of visualizing the whole system with a so-called shit flow diagram. This is really a serious tool. You can look that up, where you can then see which part of the sludge or of the excreta is managed safely at which point of the value chain. So this is really good to identify some of the bottlenecks and some of the major challenges. Getting to the technology. So basically, we, for both wastewater and fecal sludge treatment, we follow something what was called the Dewatts Approach. A little bit confusing because it's decentralized wastewater treatment. When it started, it was only wastewater treatment, but now it was also adapted to fecal sludge management. And the basic approach of it is to have resource efficiency. So basically to reuse as much as possible, to not use electrical energy, not avoid pumping wherever possible. So it really flows by gravity, not having an aerobic system, which requires aerators, and then also having a modular approach, so which can be adapted to the requirements and also the ability to pay. So if there's ability to pay, you can start with the first pre-treatment and some primary treatment, but you might leave out the secondary or the advanced treatment. So it is basically, it's simple, quite simple to operate, as these are mainly like cleaning tasks and looking that there's no clogging. For example, if there's a lot of oil in the wastewater, this can happen, of course, that then this accumulates at certain parts and then leads to clogging, that there's solid waste, and this leads to challenges in the system. We need to desludge also here the sludge which accumulates, but then is basically decomposed because of all our microorganisms which are in our biogas digester. And so this is a biological treatment, but nevertheless, after some time, the sludge has to be removed and further treated. So these are some of the operational tasks. It can be implemented like in, I would say, any country with locally available material and locally available skills. So a trained mason can implement the systems. And the basic approach is, of course, anything what should be implemented should also be operational and should be maintained. So that we always think of the operation and maintenance before implementing anything. And yeah, so here is like an overview of the shocking chart, I think. This was a study done in India and a few years ago, comparing many different systems, from very mechanized systems, activated sludge process, SBRs, MBRs, yeah. So, but also comparing them with soil-based filters, or this ABR based, so like the Dewatts approaches. And the takeaway lesson learned in this project was that more or less they were all having the same effluent characteristics, although there were systems which were having nitrification, denitrification, which were designed for phosphate removal. But after certain years of operation, the complex systems just failed because, for example, there was no fund available for maintaining, or there was no fund available for electricity. And then if the the blowers and the aerobic system is turned off to save electrical energy, because there's no monitoring of the systems, no control, then the nature-based simple solutions have the same treatment efficiency. And then if we look at the costs, we see that also here, comparing the same systems with different sizes. So more on the right, we have the large scale systems, and at the left, we have the very small ones. And then we see always that, again, we have the different technologies: activated sludge process, MBBR, SBR, MBR, Dewatts, and here the soil-based systems. And we see that this more nature-based systems are not necessarily much cheaper in the implementation, but much cheaper in the operation. So the red is the operation and the blue is the implementation. So the capital costs are maybe the same, maybe lower of this more simplified systems, but the operational costs are much lower. So if you do really the balance over 10 years, there's a significant difference. And this is also maybe, again, this takeaway of the stepwise approach. So if we want to provide a solution for all, we can go first for a not very high treatment efficiency, but better implemented for a large part of the population than going for very high treatment efficiency and implementing this only for a small part of the population. And this is again the case study area, like also where I showed the pictures in the beginning. This is called Mborahati in Dar es Salaam. So you can see like kind of informal in the background, and behind here was also the picture from the flooding. So it's not very visible here, but there's quite some slope, and this area is also prone to flooding, and it's very difficult to access. So the first row of houses is accessible, and all behind there is really difficult to access. And there's a school and a playground and some small businesses, and this is the local government authority, their office, and this is then the treatment plant, the fecal sludge treatment plant, which was implemented basically in the middle of the community. So really in the main plaza, you could call it. And you can imagine the resistance of the population against this treatment plant. But in the end, they accepted it. The one big milestone for this acceptance was to bring the representatives from the community to existing treatment plants, because most people could, of course, not imagine how such a treatment plant looks like. They were imagining stabilization ponds or any other systems which have quite a nuisance. But then now this Dewatts, as I mentioned, is underground. There's no nuisance. You don't smell it, you don't hear it. After seeing it, basically there was an acceptance for it. And yeah, I would like to go through it very fast. You see here the small tricycle bringing the sludge to the treatment plant, and there we have a screening unit inside. So it's all covered, it's all closed, so that also to control the vectors, so flies cannot go in and then go out and sit on the food of anyone who is eating in the surrounding. So here we have screenings inside to take out especially the solid waste. It is also there controlled so that during the discharge can go through the small holes. The pipe can be connected there. And then there's an equalizer. So basically, because fecal sludge comes in batches and charges, so then there's like 1 cubic meter or even 10 cubic meter if a truck comes in one go, and this has to be slowly released into the treatment plant. There's a simple drying place for the solid waste, which is also covered so that flies cannot go in and out. And then we have a biogas digester, which is underground. And basically this is how it looks like if it's under construction. It's a dome shape, and this was too fast. And then is later, and in the background we can see an expansion chamber. So basically the expansion chamber would be this, and then this is the inlet, and this is the dome shape, and the sludge goes in. Is also solid liquid separation, the first part of fecal sludge treatment. So this the solids sediment, and they also mix up with the accumulated biomass. So biomass is then the microorganisms which have been in there, which feed on the organics provided by the sludge. And yeah, because this biomass, the microorganisms eat up the organics, they reduce, they decompose it, and their exhaust gas is methane, is biogas mainly. And this can be collected in here and can be stored. Having an expansion chamber means basically if biogas is produced, it accumulates here and it pushes the water out to the outlet. But then if you consume the biogas, water has to flow back into the system. So, and here we have a water column. So we can have 80 centimeter water column, which creates enough pressure to in the end use the biogas. And at the same time, this also leads to mixing here again of the fresh sludge and the biomass. Yeah, so then expansion chamber, and then there's this other core part, which is an anaerobic buffet reactor and an anaerobic filter. So this is then for the liquid fraction. And this is also very similar to wastewater treatment then, although the characteristics of this effluent is different to wastewater. But in wastewater treatment, we use the same modules, but with a little bit different design. Looks like a septic tank with a small difference of having the pipe going to the ground. So here we mix the biomass again, so not the fresh sludge, but the biomass, the microorganisms which eat up our organics. We mix it with the solids which are still present in the effluent, in the water, and they then get in contact and can eat up basically the organics. And this we do then several times, basically up to 3 times usually. And then we go to a next stage where we go to an anaerobic filter, which is actually not a filter, but which is an area, a reactor, which provides area for sessile biomass. So sessile biomass, the biofilm on any growth material. So this can be any stones, any also coconut husk, can be plastic material, which provides a large specific surface area for a biofilm to grow. So basically there we have a different type of microorganisms, which then again reduce the organic pollution. Doing so, we have no nitrification, no denitrification, no phosphate elimination, no disinfection. Well, we have a type of disinfection, yes, because of, for example, warm eggs can sediment better. So, but the disinfection is minimal. Nevertheless, we reduce the organics. And now the water coming out of there would be under controlled circumstances, safe for irrigation. If we go for subsurface irrigation, so underground irrigation. And yeah, I think we can see this here now. So there's like a distribution chamber. And from here, the water is distributed around the treatment system at the hedges, but underground. So these are just perforated pipes underground, and then the hedge is grown around it. And there's no contact with anyone in the surrounding with this treated water, but not disinfected water. And this has an additional benefit. So basically our treatment plant has now a nice hedge, bougainvillea hedge, so it is more acceptable. There's still the component of sludge treatment. So after the sludge has then stayed in the digester and has decomposed, it then goes into a sludge drying bed, where basically again, just by gravity, this blue part of the pipe can be pulled out, and then the sludge comes out and it dries. And this one now is, of course, then reduced in volume because it's dried, easier to handle, and can be brought to any controlled farming. So this really should still be handled, not just sold to farmers who don't know what they are buying, but if this is brought into controlled farming or landscaping, this is fine. So about time, I'm actually not quite sure how far are we. I think we are already a little bit over time or getting to an end. Let me know. That's just this as an example how this can then look like for small scale systems, having different types of systems depending on the demand. Yeah? So if we have here easily to access area with a truck, we go with this one. If it's difficult to access, we go with that one. And then coming back to the finance aspect, there must be a cross subsidy. So this is high income, easy to serve. This is low income, difficult to serve. So the profit made here should go to subsidize these areas. And then we have the treatment, as we say, solid liquid separation. We have the solids and the liquids. This can go for, so there's now a vision. This can go for irrigation and using the sludge in the same place. And then if this is done in a good way, the harvested crops can also be used for as food. Other treatment technologies are actually more on the larger scale and not as easy to implement in the urban areas. So we have, again, anaerobic stabilization. We have the primary receiving and also the screening. Stabilization, and then we go for the planted drying beds or unplanted drying beds for the sludge, and the effluent from here can be treated in constructed wetlands. So this is more the medium to larger scale solution. But of course, this cannot be integrated into the urban context as easily. So I can still continue for long. I don't want to spend your whole evening. Maybe you let me know what is your
Tim,
yes.
yeah, I think we have gone past our 90 minutes. So you may have to wrap up. But before that, I think we have a few questions in the chat room. So you might want to take them.
Yes, please. I'm very happy to take them.
Yeah. But I'm sure you can always share the presentation.
Exactly.
So yeah.
I just I'm happy to answer any questions. I think that's better before I talk about something which is not relevant. So please feel free to ask, and I will share the presentation for sure. And yeah, but I think we addressed the questions as far as I saw it.
Okay. I think there was one from Hendrik, which asked, can you elaborate on the options for treatment systems for fecal sludge that is collected from septic tanks?
Yep. So basically this was where we were now.
Okay.
So with the basically having this one option, typical option for more medium, larger scale, not completely in the community, and having the Dewatts approach more for very decentralized small-scale solutions. But there's also something like co-composting, which is also a solution. But I think if you know the Dewatts system and this one, then we are already at the most common solutions. And both of them are not energy intensive. So they have both the approach of not using electrical energy for aerobic treatment. Yeah.
And I think there was one, I don't know if I don't remember if you did this one about urine separation from Shannon.
Yeah, I think I reacted
Okay.
on
I think
that
all
one.
the other ones were done, Ignatius.
Yeah.
Pardon?
I think all the other questions were answered.
Okay, all right, good. Yeah, I just think I missed that one. Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Any other questions you have, participants? You've been you've remained in for, and that's a good crowd for a while.
Yeah, thanks for your participation, and especially also thanks for your questions. And I think, yeah, for any further, if you're really interested to dig deeper into it, of course, all the publications, I will share the slides, as I said, and then you will also see the publications. If you're interested in detailed design of fecal sludge treatment plants, there's a very good book on that one. If you're interested in the Dewatts systems, there's also one, fecal sludge management in general, or the compendium, which I was talking about, also sanitation planning. I think these are some of the key guiding documents in the sector. But of course, also this one, maybe you will know, wastewater engineering, treatment and resource recovery, Metcalfe and Eddy. So this is like the Bible for wastewater treatment engineers, for any detailed design of a treatment system.
Right. So we'd like to, do you have any further questions, participants? Otherwise, I'd like very much to thank Mr. Tim Fettback for this very elaborate, comprehensive presentation. I think it's brought a lot of interest, generated a lot of interest, and I think we saw quite a bit of participation by way of questions. We don't normally get as many questions, and I think that was pretty good. And I'm sure that there's quite a bit to learn from the presentation, and so we will certainly, of course, we do put the whole presentation will be uploaded onto YouTube as soon as we are through, and so those who missed it can always view it, and I'm sure they would follow up with us. Yeah,
great. Yeah, and if you are interested, always feel free to contact us. We also have frequent guest speakers in our courses, so maybe we'll also share that with you if you're really interested, and we can always continue staying in contact. Yes. Yeah, sure. Thanks a lot, Ignatius, and to all the audience.
And thank you for sharing your time with us from Germany. I think it must be an odd hour for you now. But thank you very much for
getting to midnight.
For being up that hour and sharing with us all this information. Also, just before we close, I should let our participants know that this would be almost the penultimate session in our series, although we will not have a series session next week, but we will be having one on the 8th, Wednesday, the 8th of December at 9 a.m. because we are working with a project and it will be hosted from France. That is the WASCO in Dominica and WASCO in St. Lucia, the two pilot countries for that project. So they're going to be joining us with a webinar on constructed wetlands. And as there's this constructed wetlands project that is rolling out. So that's one of the first activities with us. So we're going to be inviting you through our normal channels to participate, albeit that the project is with Dominica and St. Lucia. So you will be hearing from us December 8th, 9 a.m. Eastern Caribbean time. See you then.
5 a.m. Pacific time again.
So you have a good evening, and those of you who are flying to the US for Thanksgiving, do have a good one and keep well and safe. I'm Ignatius Jean, the Executive Director at the Caribbean Water and Sewage Association, and thanking Valerie as well for again giving us an excellent presenter from the Operators Without Borders. Have a good one. Keep well and safe. Ignatius Jean signing out from CAWASA. Webinar
Ignatius,
27.
can you stay on for 1 minute?
Yes, I will.
Yeah.